Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Carlton People. Now, today is part one of three, I guess, because I'm going to be interviewing the Ian Prendercast trio, and I thought I'd start off with a non-Manchester United mug in Mr. Tim Davis, mate. What's happening?
Terry, everything's good, mate. Obviously battling with the lockdown as everybody is, but just trying to hang in there with my wife and my family and do what we've got to do. And fortunately, we've had the footy to be able to immerse ourselves in, because without it, it'd be pretty bleak sort of period.
I must say, we have. I mean, at the time of filming this, we had not had a footy festival or a footy frenzy, but it is full on. Every 4 or 5 days, it's game day.
Well, that's the thing. I think we need our 48 hours to decompress and recover, good, bad, or otherwise, after a game, and then all of a sudden the next one's right in your lap, and you're going, it is full on. And at times I think I really like it, and at other times you sit there and you're going, I just need a little bit of space from it sometimes too. But obviously nothing's normal these days, so you take what you can get, and the fact that we've got it, you got to appreciate.
Yeah, no, absolutely, mate. You're right. I mean, because we're very passionate as a supporter group, as a supporter base, and we need, after a disappointing loss, I think we need that extra day or two. I now realise that 5 days is just enough. I think
Yes.
six days is the minimum that we need to get over a loss.
Yep.
That's something I've learned this year, that's for sure.
No, totally. And obviously our last two back-to-back losses, it's just sort of, it's recognised how that we're on the right tram, but when you don't win, you still don't win. And it's taken a while to be able to get our heads around exactly where we're at, but still be confident that we've got a good group and we are tracking pretty well, but we always want more.
Yeah. Look, we'll get into where we're tracking a little later, but I want to start with you, and this is what the series is all about. And I want you to take me back to the very beginning. How did you become a Carlton person? Where does it start?
It's actually a funny one. My dad grew up a Carlton supporter. My grandfather, Dad's dad, was the he controlled the gate at Pentridge Prison, so he was prison warden. And when you're in and around Coburg, you are either Carlton or you're Essendon. And Dad and my grandpa were both Carlton supporters. Grandpa brought John Nichols home one day and was in the living room with Dad when Dad must have been 14 years of age. And you sit there and you're going, that's just mad. But then there was a funny thing that happened. Dad, having seen premierships through the 60s and 70s, in the late 70s, he'd kind of seen it all, and it sounds weird, he got sick of winning. And Dad started following South Melbourne. And South Melbourne, in those days, he'd take a drive out to Lakeside Oval, he'd watch the Swans, and they were a downtrodden team, and just a classic underdog. So Dad, through the late 70s, early 80s, he became a Swan. And he's still stuck fat with them now. And Dad tried to make me a South Melbourne supporter, and there's a couple of photos of me as a 5-year-old with a Swans jumper on. And when I got to the age that I could make a decision, and granted Carlton were flying at that stage, 81, 82 back-to-back premierships, me at ages 5 and 6, I've sort of gone, yeah, thanks very much, I'll jump on board with that. And I've been staunch ever since. And the fact that there is Carlton blood in the background, you sit there and you're going, to me, it was meant to be. And I've always loved my footy, really enjoy it, but from as long as I've been able to make the choice, it's only been navy blue.
Love it. That's fascinating. I like it. Yeah, it's my favourite question. It's my favourite question because I get my favourite answer every time, and we're all so similar. I mean, it's generally got to do with family or childhood environment, but they're all so unique in their own way.
Totally. And for some reason, as you say, I've got so many mates at different stages of my development. They're all Essendon supporters for some reason, and in a different, sliding doors moment, I could easily be an Essendon supporter now because of those heavy influences along the way. But I've always been staunch. But then the fact that our rivalry with Essendon is what it is. I mean, we're all told we have to hate Collingwood, and I do. I very healthily hate Collingwood, but Essendon's the one. Essendon's the one that we've just got to take care of every single year because my environment says we've got to knock these boys off because I don't want to hang around with my mates and get told that we haven't delivered again. And it's just funny. So
yeah. How far back does the memory go in terms of the first game or training or whatever it is like that you've watched or were at, even if it's vague?
Oh no, it's not vague at all. Dad was a school teacher, and so a lot of the memories I've got, Dad, in September holidays, we would go to the footy club that was playing in the grand final that weekend. We'd go to the training on like the Thursday night. And so, all throughout that era, we would rock up. I mean, I remember going 93 and 95 and being really excited in those days. Mum and Dad, we had a VFL family membership, so what the AFL membership is now. So we go out to Waverley, not every weekend, but pretty regularly. And you'd sit above the concrete bunkers where the players would be or where the camera was, and you wouldn't necessarily be there for a Carlton game, but you go and you'd watch anything. But as far as going to Carlton games, I probably started going regularly as about a 13-year-old. And a teacher, an integration aide that Dad worked with, Rhonda, she'd take me. She was a Carlton supporter, but she had two boys and her husband were all Geelong supporters. And she said to Dad in passing, Dad said, "Oh, yeah, my son barracks for Carlton." And she said, "Oh, does he go?" And he goes, "Oh, I really battled to get in there most weekends." And she said, "You get him to my house, I will take him. I will take him every week." And Dad thought Rhonda was just being sort of nice and courteous. Rhonda is a nutcase in all the right ways. And she took me to every single game. We went to the 93 grand final together, the 95 grand final together. And Rhonda's a lovely woman. She used to go with her dad from a very young age. But, from the age of probably 13 through to probably 23, I'd go to the footy with Rhonda every single week. And then once I had my own car and all that sort of stuff, then all of a sudden you weren't reliant on others. And it took a bit to sort of break that habit. And then I'd go on my own. I became a Carlton Social Club member. And the passion still continues.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have to ask because it seems like you've had a really good experience with winning and all of that. What was it like being, part of the great era? I mean, obviously I'm 29. I mean, it doesn't need to be said what I've experienced, but what was it like?
Well, my memories, I remember watching the 82 grand final. Dad took long service leave. We went to the Commonwealth Games up in Brisbane. Dad was really heavily into his athletics, track and field. So we went to go and see that. We were in Dubbo watching the 82 grand final. And when the Blues won, at that point, I was sold. I remember 86 and watching Paul Meldrum play really, really well in a losing grand final. And then we came back and we won 87, and that was, that was justification for having lost one. And obviously that was first premiership for Sticks and Braddles and those sorts of guys that really sort of formed that was when I was at my most impressionable and loved it. We went down the slippery slope a little bit, sort of 90, 91, and then we regathered. I still remember end of 92, we finished the season off magnificently. We beat a Bulldogs team that made a prelim, I reckon. We went close to knocking off a Collingwood, and you knew we were coming. To get to 93, I was certain we were going to win that grand final until about 5 minutes before they bounced the ball, and this feeling washed over me of we're not going to win. And I don't know what it was, and it just wasn't our day. I was certain we'd win 94, and we went out in straight sets, and I was devastated, just devastated, because you thought that was the one. We've thrown away a premiership. And then 95, when you thought we were probably cooked, we just found another gear, and that was just pure elation. 95, that was just it was justification for a great team that had done well for a long period of time, and the fact that we took care of Geelong the way that we did. My only lament is we didn't beat them by 100. When we got sort of 80 points up, they kicked a few cheap goals late and got back to 61, I think was the final margin. But I wanted a 100-point victory. I don't know why. I didn't want to humiliate them, but you just wanted to make sure everybody remembers this was, at the time, the greatest team of all time. 99, I didn't go to the preliminary final. I worked at an election as a polling officer, And so I was ducking in and out of the kitchen trying to get scores, and obviously, the greatest day ever, albeit preliminary final. The fact that it didn't bear fruit with a premiership is sort of a bit dissatisfying. And then the shame is our 2000 team was as good a side as Carlton's ever put on the field as a collective, and don't have anything to show for it. They were an awesome side. They were good enough to win a premiership in almost any other year. We just came up against the juggernaut that was Essendon, and credit where it's due, they were a good side, but we had injuries at exactly the wrong time. We might have even taken care of them, all things going well. And then obviously since 2000, it's been a bit of a struggle. There's been a few spikes in form and excitement and all that sort of stuff, and it hasn't quite bared fruit. But I like where we're heading at the moment. But to be, I used to go to the footy every week, Terry, just going, you knew you were going to win, and you'd get to stages and an opposition, it would push you a little bit, and you're going, oh, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. And then if you're playing at Princes Park, the crowd would get into them third quarter, and they just sort of carry them and get a bit of momentum. The old premiership quarter, we'd do what we needed to do, and we'd find a way to win, and you'd go home satisfied. And it was just, whether that's a Carlton arrogance or it's just the reality of where we were at when we were good and we were really up and going, you just won. And like the last 2 weeks when it was there for the taking and we couldn't quite get the job done, it really, that comparison really sort of frustrates you, because once upon a time, and Sean sort of said it on our pod the other day, 3/4 time, we're saying we hope we can win, whereas these other sides like Collingwood and GWS, they obviously had this confidence we will win. That's what we need now, and so I'm looking forward to us seeing. And again, if it's arrogance, call it arrogance. I don't care. We want the W.
Yeah. What was that transition like, going from what you had experienced growing up to then getting to, maybe not 2000s, but sort of 20, the first rebuild and then the second rebuild where we are today, where it's what you just said at 3/4 time. As soon as the Giants kick a goal or two, that their heads are crumbling. So what's that like? Did it take you a while to adjust to that? What was that like?
Look, I think the way that I always looked at it was, we look at the John Elliott days, and John Elliott, I don't care who you are, was an absolute giant for our football club. He did amazing things for our club. However, he had, again, we talk about this arrogance thing, he had the mantra of we don't rebuild at Carlton. It probably took us a decade to embrace the modern game, how you recruit, how you build a list, how you get better. And obviously that was to our detriment, and the story's been told many a time. So that, watching the dinosaur of a football club we kind of were, and to see the competition go past us and us not being able to be agile enough to be able to keep up, that was really frustrating. The night we were stripped of our draft picks, because it was, the announcement came through at like midnight, and the draft was on at 10 o'clock the next morning. So we were 10 hours away from being able to take Goddard and Wells, who were seen as our vehicles, out of where we're at, and then all of a sudden it was gone, and it was devastating. So going through that era, and then obviously having to being set back on our heels again, even further. And as I always say, we were $1 million over the salary cap, and we were winning a wooden spoon. So we were cheating, but it wasn't doing us any good. Oh. So there was just so much that had to change at Carlton in the way that we looked at it. So, and then obviously ever since then, it's just sort of been a rebuild, a realisation of what we need to do. But it's a very different Carlton these days. You're right. We've had to really learn to appreciate the wins that we get. But again, we've got to bolt on that arrogance again to get to the stage that we're back to the monster that I know that we can be.
Yeah, it just seems like we're doing it the long way, which is what we needed to do, rather than trying to take that shortcut here or there, and it's probably going to result in that short-term frustration, which is probably what we're feeling now, to be fair. And with the hope is the key word, that it's going to be sustained success. So, looking at the current state of the club, on field, off field, what do you feel about the club? What are your takings about where we're at?
I really like where we're at. I think the way that we moved Sauce on last year was a bit clumsy, and I think it was a really hard situation. I really like what Sauce did. I mean, I spent a couple of years recruiting with Port Adelaide, so the recruiting list build side of things, something that's always been really, really dear to my heart. And while I was working at Port, you still had an eye on, you put your Carlton hat on and what would we do in these years. And I think those 2 years when we drafted, we took Cruiser and Armfield in one draft, and we took Yaz, and we traded for Warnock that year with our second rounder, and we took Mitch Robinson at pick 40. So again, you still get to do what you're doing while doing a job for one team, but wearing a Carlton hat on the other. And it doesn't stop you from doing what you're doing, because at the end of the day, you're just assessing talent, and the club you work for just arranges them in the order that they think they're at. But I like the way that we've identified talent. I think my only, and it's not a criticism, I think it's just an opportunity, is how do we develop the young talent that we've got? I think there's been a lot of talk in the last few days when, because where we think about where we want to be right now versus where we are, you sit there and you're saying, we would like to have seen more development out of Paddy Dow and Lockie O'Brien, and not so much Zach Fisher, because I think Zach's coming along pretty well. Samo potentially, but he's probably been played out of position. But I think the last couple of years, we've always sort of thought that we'd use our first round draft pick on a ready-made, mature player, and we've been able to go back to the well and bring in guys like Brodie Kemp, and Sam Philp showed a bit. So looking forward to just further development coming from underneath where we're at the moment. But I think people forget how good players like Caleb Marchbank are. That intercept mark, really good kick of the footy, great engine, runs all day. Obviously, Charlie Curnow and his kicking ability, the way that he can blow games apart completely on his own. We've had a really good season, had no contribution from two players like that. Matty Cruz is the fascinating one. I think Matty comes back to the club and he'll probably be on a minimum salary, and I think he'll be able to finish his career off hopefully the way that he wants to and his body cooperates. But the hole that he's left this year has been remarkable, and Pitto and TDK have done a terrific job, like a really, really good job, in not having your number one ruckman. And still, there haven't been too many games when you've signed, geez, we've been blown away by the opposition ruckman. I think early against Melbourne, we were found wanting, and then Pitto's last three quarters, I think, were really good. So I really like where we're at. Again, the promise in Tom De Koning, I've said a few times, if you could inject the feeling you get out of his talent straight into your veins, and the stuff that he does, whether it's in the air, on the ground, just swinging on that left foot, he is just so exciting, and his potential to me is limitless. But yeah, I like the team. We've obviously built from back forward the whole way through. To watch Jacob Wiedering's season this year has just been an absolute joy. He is just phenomenal. And if he doesn't get All-Australian, to me, there is a clear flaw in the system. Because, look, Darcy Moore's a lovely footballer. He moves well. He's a great athlete. But you don't rely on Darcy Moore to hold the whole team together the way that Jacob Wiedering does. He's just phenomenal to watch. And when you see Wieders get the ball, and he scans the ground and he'll do those long dart 50-metre kicks to blokes completely on their own, and he just attacks from defence as well. Honestly, like, the one-on-one's awesome, but his creativity as a quarterback is just so underrated. And obviously getting Doc back into the team this year was great. We can now rely on him again. So, I like where we're at. We're probably one really good midfielder away from genuinely competing. So whether that's the development of an SPS inside, an O'Brien, a Dow, a Brodie Kemp, or we're going to bring somebody in from outside through free agency or whatever else, I don't know. I'm really fascinated by our off-season this year, actually. If we've got money to spend, it'll be interesting to see which way we go. I'm a really big fan of Zach Williams, the footballer. I don't think we need that footballer, but I think any time you get to add a genuine A-class footballer in, it's only going to make us better. It's just how do you accommodate? And maybe if Zach Williams comes in, he either plays midfield or he pushes SPS into midfield. Either way, I think it does give us a chance to get better. Desperate to see David Cunningham make good on the talent that he's got, because, again, he's that guy that he's the next step. He becomes the bona fide midfield forward that we need, and we're just that step closer. And obviously, addition of Jack Martin this year for nothing. It has just been unbelievable. So there's a lot to like, and And Paddy's had an off season this year. I think he's dealing with his body. He's got a couple of things off field that are probably not going to make him be able to put his best foot forward on it. So obviously, if he can get that in hand and allow it to just be able to complement the way he's playing his footy, and he's back to his best, I think we become pretty scary again. So we've gone close, but there's still so much organic growth in this team. It's exciting for mine.
It's, off season for Carlton fans has been really the mecca every year. It's our finals.
Yep.
And there's so much talk and hype and for many reasons, and I'm excited for off season as well. I'm big on bringing in, whether it be players or coaches or development people. I'm big on winners, premiership winners, bringing them into the club. And as you were sort of explaining to me, reeling off those names, talking about the organic growth, it sort of dawned on me, we've drafted X, Y, and Z with the idea that they're going to be stars or whatever we think they're going to be. So for you personally, how do you balance between going and paying for the big name players now and backing the fact that you drafted these kids that they're either going to become good, and then you don't want to sort of have money missing when these guys actually peak and then you've got to sort of lose them? How do you balance that?
I think it's the hardest thing in football. I mean, you look at, in the last few years, the way Hawthorn's recruited, and they've taken Tom Scully, former number one draft pick, Jonathan Patton, former number one draft pick. They had great success in bringing guys like Gunston and Burgoyne and Gibson and Brian Lake, and it gave them great success. They've gone to the well too often in getting players to be able to top up what they've got, and when what you've got isn't enough, and the guys you're bringing in, you're taking a risk on, you fall away so very, very quickly. And we did the same thing in the era when we were really developing, and we've always talked about that final we played over in West Coast. And we were so close to winning that and playing a preliminary final against Geelong on the MCG, where we used to eat them alive. We could have been playing in a grand final. But from that point, our recruiting just fell away, and we didn't make good on any of that talent coming through. And so I think regardless of where you're at, you've still got to bring young talent in, whether they're 18-year-olds or they're 20, 21-year-olds. Your development team have to continue to top up with kids. So the fact that we've continued to bolt on talent every year is awesome. However, and we all know, just because you've got a guy that's, say, a number one draft pick or whatever, it doesn't guarantee that you've got a star. You've got a piece of plasticine that is really, really highly rated, and you've still got to develop him. One of the years I helped with Port, to me, Jack Watts was the standout player coming through. He was the quintessential piece of plasticine. But at Melbourne, they didn't develop him, and he probably didn't quite have that killer instinct that you need. So you've probably got to profile your players a little bit better as well. But he's a guy with so much talent that just hasn't made good on it. He's had injuries of late that have obviously curtailed his career. But nothing's a guarantee. You just got to continue to believe and know that you've taken these kids for the right reason, and just keep developing them and get them better. But you've also got to be able to take that step back from your list and saying, well, what are we missing? And whether what you're missing is attitudinal, whether it's culture, as you say, do you just bring in a winner because they're a winner? Even if it's just an old head, and, will they be able to help us long-term on-field, or is there the influence they have is more off-field and culture-driven and all those sorts of things? I think that's a really big part of understanding what you've got, especially when you're still a young list. I think Jack Noon's addition this year, a guy that had played 150, near 200 games of football, big engine, runs all day, desperate for that next level of opportunity and success, changing environment. I reckon he's been a great addition to our club. Obviously, he had one hell of a moment against Freo, and we all loved it. The interesting thing will be, where does Jack sit in the pecking order? Does he have 3 and 4 kids go past him in the next 6 to 18 months, and he sort of, ends up sort of a fringe player again? Well, if that happens for the football club, it's fantastic. It's not ideal for Jack, but we need pressure at selection to be able to have guys that are belting down the door, and ready to be a part of it, and ready to play really good senior footy. And we hadn't had that for 5 years. So to now actually have genuine competition, the fact that it took a while for Zach Fisher to get back in, the fact that Lockie O'Brien can't get a game at the moment, is probably good, but you just hope the Lockies of the world, just find what they need to take that next step and demand to be a part of it. That's what we want to see.
Yes.
But then equally where we're at right now, we've got a lot of guys that have got talent. If we've got to shed one or two to be able to get the right piece of the puzzle in, that's where that recruiting team, list management team just need to know what we've got, what they have the capability of becoming, and if there's a sacrifice we need to make to be better in the longer term, we've just got to be able to be smart enough and know what the right move is. So, yeah, we might have everything we need within the club right now, and we don't need to be looking outside of it. But if there's the opportunity and it makes us better, let's do it.
Yep, no, for sure. I'm probably going to bring this up with all three of you just because I have to. Now, obviously, I was living in Israel for a couple of years, and I came across the podcast somewhere in 2018. Somewhere in I don't exactly remember when, but for me, it was I had to stay connected, and you guys played a big part in that, whether you realize that or not. Just your voices and just hearing the conversation, because I was in an environment where there was no footy talk or nothing like that. So, where did the Ian Prendercast start, and where are you guys at now?
So I think the original brainchild was probably more Sean Peter Budge and Alex Billen, and they were sort of lifelong mates that shared a passion for sport. And I think Fabian was working with Alex at one point in time at a traffic consultancy, and then they ultimately said, "Let's do this." But what they started off at was all sport. And I think when they first started, it was sort of approaching an NBA final series, and they'd cover off basketball, they'd talk NFL, they'd talk Aussie rules, and EPL obviously was big on the agenda. Fab's a big Juve fan, so it took us everywhere. And then a couple of times I'd come in and do a couple of little guest spots, predominantly on the Tour de France, which I've always really enjoyed. Helped him out with that a couple of times, and then as it turned out, Alex's wife was having their first baby, and he'd sort of decided that he couldn't give the weekly commitment to it, and decided that he'd step aside. And the boys said, "Did I want to jump on?" Which I was happy to, because I'm a sports nut as well. And then obviously once you've got three Carlton supporters around the microphone, you can, and we continued to talk all sport, but in the end you just sort of thought there's just an obvious link here, and the more we do it, the more you enjoyed it. But it was a space that there was a few other players in it at the end of the day, and but we've all got a voice, we've all got a different opinion, and I think at the end of the day, the more people that are talking Carlton and getting excited about this amazing football club, the better. And again, we've probably simplified what we've done just to focus on Carlton, because it's just a bit easier. Because it became pretty hard to be across all sports all of the time. So we've streamlined it to be just Carlton. Whether we remain just Carlton or not, it'll probably depend on whether the Carlton Football Club keeps giving us content to be able to talk about. But if we could sort of ride where we're at and see our ascendance through to hopefully ultimate success, that'd make for a pretty good chapter in your life to sort of almost have it on record to look back in a few years' time. But we have a ball, and especially during lockdown at the moment, the fact that you can talk to two blokes that you just really enjoy waxing with, the fact that we can't do it face to face is disappointing, but we just have fun. And I mean, we did one the other night where Fabian couldn't be a part of it because he was feeling a bit crook, so it was just Sean and I, and it was good, but it wasn't the same.
It's not the same. No, it's not the same.
It's not the same. And I must say, I look forward to it, and it's hilarious. We these days try and record straight after the game, just because it's kind of hard to get three people in at the right time to be able to do everything. And so then win, lose or draw, doing it straight after the game just kind of captures the emotion. Sometimes we probably don't have enough perspective, and maybe that's just having three different heads allows you to be able to take stock, and you might actually hit on the right elements, because sometimes you can overreact and throw the toys out of the cot and all that sort of stuff when we're not winning or whatever else. But then equally, the night that we recorded straight after Jack Nunes kicked the winning goal against Freo, honestly, it was hilarious. I could have talked all night. I was that high.
There's something about the three of you. I don't know when I feel like you've hit a sweet spot at some point this year, I've been listening for over nearly 2 years now. At some point this year, you hit a sweet spot where just the conversation. I don't know. Maybe it was you got more comfortable. I don't know what it was, but for me, as a listener from the outside, it just felt like every time I listen. Now I wait until Monday or Tuesday when I'm driving to listen.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I'm in the room. It's so organic, and it's just a testament to how the three of you work together.
No, I appreciate the feedback. I mean, look, Sean often says we're just three blokes that are just doing something out of the garage type thing, and we are, and we're not proposing to be the voice of the footy club or anything else like that. We're just it's an outlet, I guess. At the end of the day, it's an outlet, and if we can take 5 people on the journey, or 50, or 500, or whatever. That's just the opportunity that exists, and the fact that you tune in, Terry, I appreciate, because again, we're just 3 flogs that like to think we know what we're talking about. Sometimes we make sense, most of the time I'm sure we don't.
Mate, I'm the same. It's the same notion.
Yeah, but it really is good fun, and look, the content's the footy club, that's what gets us together, but we just enjoy the waxing with one another. They're good fellas. I love them. I've known Fabian for a long time. I worked with Fabian, and I don't know if we mentioned this when you chatted to us. The week we landed Juddy in trade period, Fabian and I were working with one another, and we had a couple of other Carlton supporters that we worked with, and it was forever was the update. Have we landed Juddy yet? Have we landed Juddy yet? And it was the longest week of our lives. And then when we finally nailed it, the delight in knowing that we got him was awesome. Obviously, throughout that week, we thought we were going to lose Fev. We didn't. We hung on to him. Obviously, we ended up losing Josh Kennedy, which we all knew was, it was such a big thing to be able to move. But the whole time we were just saying we never wanted to lose pick one, because what pick one might be coming. And Matty Cruiser will end up having had a great career. But sliding doors ultimately says, well, maybe if we had been able to pick one, and keep Kennedy in getting Judd in, what would the club have looked like? But again, it's all pure speculation. It is what it is. But you would have loved seeing Josh Kennedy kicking those goals for Carlton that he's done over in West Coast. He's been exceptional.
No, he sure has. I want to ask you one more question before I let you go. I do it with everyone. It's the last question of this series for everybody. We'll look back on this video now that you and I have got a little memory etched in the internet.
Yes, love it.
When do we lift up premiership number 17? What year is it going to be?
I reckon it's 23.
Yeah.
I this year I didn't have expectations of finals this year. I just wanted to see continued organic growth. Finals was always a chance, but it was certainly it wasn't a requirement. I reckon 2021 making finals is a requirement, and I reckon 2022 we're good enough to be in and around the top 4. If we'd won it in 2022, I wouldn't be surprised. But I reckon we'll have been there and thereabouts for long enough, and I reckon we'll have galvanised as a group. And so I reckon, to put the year on, I reckon 23 is our year. Again, wouldn't surprise if it was a year earlier. What I'm fascinated to understand is if we build the side that I think that we're building, you could see a sustained period of 5 or 6 years where we get to ask the question of the whole competition of, if you think you're good enough, come and get it. But I genuinely think that we'll put our hands up and be a part of it for 5 or 6 years. And that's what I'll happily take one, but if we can hang around and make life difficult for a lot of other teams for a long, sustained period of time, it'll be just like the 90s and the early noughties again, and that'd be great. That'd upset a lot of opposition supporters, and that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, I feel like when the premiership comes, there'll be a unification of the supporter base. The generation that has been lost, and the generation that was, and I think it'll be a unification.
And look, and I think the voices in these sorts of platforms over the last sort of 3 to 5 years will have had a lot to do with that unification as well. Everybody comes from a slightly different bent, a slightly different background. We look at our game, our team, our history, our future slightly differently. And those differences of opinions, I think, are fantastic. And we're all able to complement one another so well But yeah, I'm excited. There's a lot of really good Carlton people that are ready for success. I think they've done the hard yards, they've earned it. When we get it, it'll be beautiful. But if we've been able to drag a few newies along board along the way to get there too, it'd be terrific.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I've really enjoyed this. I want to thank you so very much for your time. It's always great to speak to you guys. Keep up the great work, and we'll speak in the future for sure.
Excellent, and likewise, love everything that you've done, and keep plugging the Blues because it's thoroughly worthwhile.
Absolutely, mate. Go the Baggers.
On your test, thanks, mate. Go
See
Blues.
you, mate.